But what about all those times that spouses stop being married even though they're living in the same house? And by that, that can happen in many, many ways. How many times do we not put our spouse first? This happens all the time. We hear about football widows, as they call them, or sports widows for that matter, depending on what the sports season is. A lot of times, classically men, we always hear about paying attention to sports or whatever hobbies. No, sports and hobbies are great and they're absolutely necessary. It's very important to have a hobby, to have something that is enjoyable for the sake of enjoyment and is healthy. And it's very important to have a hobby. If you don't have one, find one because it makes life that much more enjoyable. And it's actually very therapeutic. If somebody has a true passion, a true hobby, that's not only healthy for yourself, but it's healthy for the relationships that you're going to form. So in a marriage, it is healthy to have hobbies and for spouses to encourage each other to have hobbies. A really healthy marriage is when spouses kind of find interest in each other's hobbies. It doesn't have to be that way, but if nothing else, respect each other's hobbies and say, oh, yeah, they're really into X, Y, or Z. They really like their whatever collection. But, I'm happy for them that they have that because when they do that, they geek out on take your pick. They have a good time and they seem a lot happier for it. And I encourage it. So long as it's healthy, so long as it's not something that's going to break up the marriage, so long as it's not something that's going to take up so much time, such as sports, which are a dedicated season, where you ignore your spouse, where you ignore your family or your duties as a family. During football season, do all men go to church? Or do you say, I can't go to church because the football game's on? That's where our priorities are. If I can't go to church because the football game's on, that means I can't probably pay attention to my wife because the football game's on, unless some wives get into the games with a husband. But if as a couple, we're putting the football game before going to church, that's a situation where we're already on slippery ground because our marriage is united in the sacrament, of making sure that we put God first, even in a marriage, even though I put my wife first, shall we say, I got to put God before my wife. And so the question came up, how do I fix this? My wife won't talk to me anymore. She wants to be affectionate or she doesn't want to be affectionate. I want to, I'm not saying that we have to be intimate again, but gosh, I go by and I try to give her a hug. I tell her nice things and she doesn't reciprocate. And so when I told this gentleman, as I said, you got to stop doing all that because he's all, but I really mean it. I truly, and I said, hang on. You mean it because you feel bad, but why weren't you doing all that stuff before? Why weren't you going up to her and telling her you loved her and that she was important and that you wanted to hold her hand? And when did you stop doing that? You started doing it again now. But there was a moment when you stopped doing that. That's the moment you stopped being married. That's the moment that you stopped making that effort. That's the moment that you forgot your responsibility. And we do have that responsibility to make her feel special, to put her first in your life, to let her know that she was first in your life. It's kind of like our relationship with God. When was the moment that I decided, going to mass is just, I got other priorities. The football game is a bigger priority. When did we make that decision? When did we start having that affair on God? Well, so what I told him was, in order for you to fix this, one, you're not going to fix it. I said, you just have to go ahead and start living your life. And he said, what does that look like? What do you mean? And I said, you just got to start being married. First thing, what do I do? So I told him the first thing you got to do is show up. Show up to, well, I'm already there, Dr. Sutton. Well, no, I don't mean physically. Show up in your heart. Show up. Wake up in the morning in your mind and in your heart. And the first thing you should think about is God. Say your morning prayers and think, I am married. What am I doing for my family today? So instead of having that career goal checkoff list of saying, okay, I got to go to work and I got to, talk to my boss and move up the ladder. And yeah, you got to do all those things. There's no question about that. But at the top of our new list, of our list for life is happy marriage or faithful marriage or marriage. Put that up there. My whole point of going to work was to support my family, not to grow in the business world or the the work world, not to move up the ladder. If we can, the opportunities are, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But if that's my goal, is that going to interfere with my marriage? Because if I do move up that ladder, if I do want to go get that title, is that going to make my job change in such a way that now I'm not going to have as much time for my family? That's something to consider. We don't think about that because in our society, all we care about is those titles, moving up the ladder, maybe a little raise or something. Oh, that's that we really want to focus on. But that puts the family to the side. The real question is, if my family is my priority number one, then every action I take, work-wise, career-wise, I can't do that without thinking my family comes first. How is this going to affect my family? So that's point number one. So our checkoff list should be that. The next thing on our checkoff list might be, how do I grow in virtue so I can be a better husband? So I can be a better father? What virtue do I need to work on? What is it that I need? Do I need more prudence? Do I need more fortitude? Do I need more patience? Do I need to pray for faith, hope, and love? What is it that I need? That should be on our checkoff list. How can I follow the commandments better? Because I know that if I'm good with God as the head of the household, as the man of the house, there's going to be graces coming into my household. That's going to have a domino effect in my family. These are the questions you need to be asking yourself as soon as you wake up in the morning. So this is where you got to start working on yourself. The next part is, how do you be married? You wake up, you got to be present. You got to see what is needed in the house. And more than anything else, take a step back and remember what your wedding vows are. So if we're going to read the traditional Catholic wedding vows, this is what they are. The vows are I, and then you say your name, take you, and you say the person's name, to be my, take your pick, husband or wife. I promise to be true in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health. I will love you and honor you all the days of my life. Now, we got to take that apart. The first thing is, I told him, if you look at those wedding vows, if we read those wedding vows, there's nothing about, I'm marrying you and you have to do this. Now, of course, in a marriage, there is an expectation that the spouse or the partner is going to reciprocate this because they're saying the same vows back to me. So I'm assuming that they're going to reciprocate. I have no control over that. This is where marriage is freely given and taken. The person agreed to it. It's a verbal agreement. It's a contract, really is. It's a marital contract. And what it is I have to keep up my end of the contract. I have no control over whether you do or not. And I told him the same way she had no control over whether you kept it when you started, veering from the marital promises. He said he didn't want to admit that, but that was true. And I told him, now, when you look at these marriage vows, all it says is I. It doesn't say you, unless it means that, you as a subject, you have to do this or that. It says, I will do certain things. The first thing is, I promise to be true to you in good times and in bad. And what does that mean? To be true to you means that I'm going to be honest about who I am, what I need, and what I feel needs to be fulfilled in the marriage with you in mind. I'm going to be true to you. I'm going to be honest with you. You might not always like to hear it, but that's part of a good friendship. A good friend will let the other person know, hey, you messed up here. You didn't mess up there. I don't like how you did this. I'm going to be true to you, whether we're in good times or in bad. And that's very important. It means that there's a sense of honesty. I'm going to be honest with you about what's going on. So I told him, looking back, if the marriage was stale, if you're going to be true to her, you should have said, hey, our marriage kind of sucks right now. What can we do about it? That's a perfectly good place to be. That's not bad. A lot of people might take offense to that and say, how can you tell your spouse that your marriage is not in a good place? That's exactly what you need to do, especially if your marriage is not in a good place, because that's like saying, hey, you know what? My car is in disrepair. It needs a few things. I better tune it up because I want it to drive well. In fact, it's a beautiful thing to tell your spouse, I don't think our marriage is working here or there, because it means that I want to make our marriage better. I want to make sure that we're running smoothly here, that we're both on the same page, because I love this marriage and something feels off. Sometimes when we just talk about things, we might realize the other person's either on the same page, had no idea about it, and is more than willing to say, yeah, what can we do? Well, why don't we go out? Why don't we talk a little bit more? We're going to continue to grow as people. We continue to mature. For all I know, different people, as we get older, we might have different tastes. Gosh, but you always like to eat vanilla ice cream. Yeah, but now I like a different flavor. I never knew that. You can live with the same person in the house for a long time and not always be aware of what their tastes are, what they like, if there's no communication, if there is no love being communicated. Let's look at the next part. In sickness and in health. Now, sickness and health, we always think of this as saying, oh, I'm physically healthy or I am physically not healthy. But the reality is there a spiritual illness going on in the relationship? Is there something that's keeping us from being healthy? Sickness and health can also be you're addicted to football. There was another couple that didn't have an affair, but the husband revealed to his wife that he had an addiction to pornography. And he might as well have told her that he had a full affair, because that's the exact same way she reacted. Am I mentally healthy? Am I always assuming the good of my spouse? Am I giving my spouse the benefit of the doubt? Or do I always assume, oh, look at them now. Look at what did I marry? I should have listened to my mother, should have listened to my dad, whatever it is, because we can very easily find faults in our spouses. And that's actually part of what marriage is. Not finding the faults, but recognizing that we are not perfect, recognizing the imperfections in our spouse, and still loving them for who they are. A healthy marriage is somebody who says, yeah, I know that they are, X, Y, or Z. I know that they do this all the time. I know that they aren't good at picking up their dirty clothes. I know that, but you know what? I love them anyway. And does that get to me? It can sometimes if I let it. And the question is, are we letting our spouses, defects get to us, or are we letting their good side, their virtues, their gifts get to us? Are we recognizing that? In today's society, there is a general trend that I have seen, especially if you do it any social media or online or anything like that. I'm not really on social media, but I do look at a lot of things in regard to relationships online. And there is a very, very big trend for spouses to, well, I should say in this particular case, it's for women to put videos online on different websites about how bad their husbands are. There was one recently where I saw a woman put a video online about how while she was sick, the kitchen was not taken care of and it was a mess. And she was just trashing her husband about this, as if, this was his fault or he failed or something along those lines. She'd been sick for a couple of days and the house was a mess. And she was talking about how poor her husband was, how disappointed she was, and really making fun of him, and it's very trendy also if you watch TV or shows to make the husband or the dad look like a buffoon instead of the head of the household. And the question I had for this lady was, what was your goal of that? What was your goal of, this is your spouse, this is a person you married. What was your goal of putting out a video trying to trash them? Did you ask them why it wasn't clean? Do you guys have an idea or an agreement that, it's your job to do this or his job to do that? If he is not, if he got busy or anything along those lines, if he has chores, are you expected to do his chores? Does he ever do videos of, if we're going to go with traditional roles, gosh, the lawn wasn't mowed or the car's oil wasn't changed or something along those lines? Is he going to trash you for it? I think that's a very, very common pitfall for spouses to assume things of each other. But the bigger pitfall, especially nowadays with the internet being such a public forum, is to trash our spouse. And that goes into the next part of the vows, where it says that you're going to love, I'm going to love you and honor you all the days of my life. How is that loving and honoring your spouse? It means really to love and honor your spouse. We always think love is, well, that means I'm going to bring you flowers and I'm going to write love letters to you. I mean, when we think of love, we think of it as very mushy gushy, but love really means that if I come down and I find out that the house is in this position, or, something's not going on that I like in the house. And let's take this case in particular again, where he was sick for a few days and came down and the kitchen was a mess. To love and honor the spouse might be, hey, let's sit down. What happened here? Or, gosh, I'm really tired. Can you help me clean up the kitchen? Or could you have done this? Have a conversation about that. Why trash your spouse publicly? Because what I've seen online is the trend is mostly women doing that to their husbands. I haven't really seen any husbands doing that to their wives. But what if the shoe were on the other foot? Do you think that you would have liked for your husband to have a conversation with you? Or do you think that you would like to have him put a video out about how horrible he thinks you are? We got to really consider this as to how is this healthy for our marriage? And this is, again, where I think our goal has to be marriage at the top of the list, with how are we going to improve this? What can we do towards the marriage of our goal list, of our career list, if you will? And really put in those bullets of how can I, if my spouse is lacking in a certain area, What can I do to help them? How can I talk to them about it? What agreement can we come to? And we might never come to that agreement. And unfortunately, that's part of being married. Part of being married means, you know what? These are some things that we just don't talk about because we're not going to agree on. That's not to say that can be healthy or unhealthy. It's not to say that it has to be unhealthy, depending on what the things are we're not talking about. And that's something to consider with a counselor or somebody if it's getting to be a problem. But if it's really something as simple as bad habits or anything that can be fixed, well, for the most part, I don't see how trashing your spouse or not talking to them is a sign of loving them and honoring them. The honoring part, you'd be surprised at how far it can go if you go up to your spouse and tell them, I really like these things about you. Let them know that. When was the last time that we told our spouse, I really like the way that you do this. I really appreciate this. Thank you for doing this, or thank you for doing that. Even everyday things. Hey, thank you for taking out the trash. I really appreciate that. Hey, thank you for having dinner ready. It was really good. Hey, thank you for going to work and providing for us in a one household income. Or thank you for going to work and providing for us in a two household income. Whatever it is, when was the last time that we honored our spouse? These are things to consider because this is what's going to be healthy for the marriage. Now, we're supposed to do this all the days of our life. Marriage is tiring, and this is where I think that a better way to educate our children, our growing children, in the sacrament, in the idea of the sacrament of marriage, is from day one to let them know marriage needs to be a priority. As Catholics, we believe this, and this is what's going to make your life happier. You need to make your marriage a priority. That's all there is to it. You need to, let your spouse know that your marriage is a priority. How do you convey that? You're going to convey that by showing up. And this is what I told this gentleman. How do I convey all this? How do I make all this happen? That's what essentially what he was asking. And what I told him was this, I opened up the Bible. One time I opened up the Bible and this passage just struck out to me because I thought sometimes we don't know how to do things, or I really need an answer right now, instead of how many people turn to mediums and psychics for answers. But I thought, no, if this is the true living word of God, and I'm going to have faith in that the Bible is the word of God, then if I open up the Bible, I'm going to find an answer in here somehow with God himself guiding me. One time I remember opening up the Bible, and this is 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 9. And it's a very, very simple verse. Now, remember, this is St. Paul, and he's in jail. But the word of God, so this was Jesus speaking to me, and this is what I told this gentleman when he was asking me, how do I do this? How do I now show my wife that I love her? The first thing was Jesus saying, do your best to come to me soon. Not St. Paul speaking to Timothy. Do your best to come to me soon. And I told him, that's what you got to do. How are you going to love your spouse? One, you got to do your best to get to Jesus soon, because that's where it starts. You're not going to love your spouse without working on yourself. So this is the first time you revealed to her that you were having these affairs, but does that mean that all of a sudden, because you did that, you are now healthy and fit to be in this marriage, and you understand the nuances of your spouse, and you understand now that you are, or you think now that you're not at risk of having an affair again? No, because as soon as she's not paying attention to you now, how are you feeling? Do you feel like, oh, what's the point? I might as well just go back to what I was doing. Very, very common to feel that way. So no, here's the challenging part. Remember, you said good times and bad. Well, this is a bad time for you for multiple reasons. And you're frustrated because she's not paying attention to you. Well, the first thing you got to do is not focus on her. You got to focus on your marriage. You got to do your best to come to me soon. And that means Jesus is talking to you. And you got to do your best to get to holy hour. You got to do your best to get your relationship right with Jesus, because the truth is, if you didn't put your spouse first, you weren't putting God first. And this is where you actually got to put God before everything else. Start going to holy hour. Start going back to Mass. Start living the Catholic life without worrying about whether your spouse is affectionate with you or not. You just got to start building yourself first as a Catholic. Next, you got to start building yourself as a man. And again, we go back to Timothy, only this time it's Timothy. This is 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 11, because he said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, here's a good verse for you. It says, but as for you, man of God, shun all this. And all this was talking about the pleasures of the world, the focus on money, the focus on whatever desires we have in fulfilling those. So shun all that, put all that aside, put all your emotional desires aside, put the importance of your emotions aside and aim at righteousness, godliness, faith, love, steadfastness, gentleness. Tell them this is what you got to do. This is how you're going to win her back. You're going to show up. You're going to be married. Whatever chores you got to do around the house, you're going to do your chores. You're going to be kind to her, but you're not going to deny that everything that happened, what happened in the situation, because really that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to say, hey, I'm sorry, and now we're back to whatever. But if you don't honor and respect the fact that she is going to be very hurt, it's like you're denying what happened. You're just trying to say, hey, let's make this go away and we're okay. And that's not being true. So this is where you got to be true to your wife. Remember, that was the first thing that we had read. You're going to be true to you, which means I'm going to be honest with you. And that's the important thing to consider. And the honesty right now is to say, hey, what I did really affected our marriage, and I got to get better at this. And now all I'm going to do is show up. I'm not going to make excuses, because whatever questions you ask, I'm not going to have a good enough answer for. That's the truth. Whatever you say, why did this happen? Why didn't you do this? Couldn't you have done? There's never going to be an answer that's going to fulfill that question. It's never going to be good enough. It's not going to matter in that sense. It matters that she's hurt. It matters that she has these questions. But no matter what answer you give her, it's not going to be good enough. This is where you just need to show up, and you got to give it time.